For more than 2 centuries, Rome had been ruled by kings. Some were wise. Some were warriors. Some transformed a small settlement into the most powerful city in central Italy. But the 7th king would do something none of the others had done. He would make the Romans hate kings. And because of him, Rome would abandon monarchy forever. What happened next would change world history. Because in 509 BC, Rome stopped being a kingdom and became a republic. By the time Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, better known as Tarquin the Proud, sat on Rome's throne, the city had changed dramatically from the days of Romulus. Rome was no longer a cluster of huts on a hill. Its population had grown. Its walls had expanded. Its influence stretched across much of Latium. But Rome's greatest threat was no longer outside its walls. It was sitting on the throne. Unlike previous kings, Tarquin ruled through fear. He ignored the Senate. He concentrated power in his own hands. Opponents disappeared. Critics remained silent. The Senate still existed, but many Romans believed it no longer truly mattered. The king's word had become law, and resentment began to grow. But despite his unpopularity, Tarquin was not an incompetent ruler. He continued military campaigns. He expanded Roman influence. Construction projects continued throughout the city. Temples rose. Defenses improved. Rome grew stronger. But every success came with a cost. The king demanded obedience. The people had little say in how they were governed. Many Romans began asking a dangerous question. What if Rome didn't need a king at all? It was a question that would have been unthinkable during the age of Romulus. Now it was spreading quietly through the city. And then came the event that changed everything. According to Roman tradition, the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, committed a terrible crime against a noblewoman named Lucretia. Lucretia was admired throughout Rome for her virtue and character. After the attack, she revealed what had happened to her family. Humiliated and devastated, she demanded justice. Then, according to the story passed down through Roman history, she took her own life. News spread rapidly. Shock turned into anger. Anger turned into outrage. And outrage turned into revolution. Whether every detail happened exactly as later Roman writers described is impossible to know. But one thing is certain. The story of Lucretia became the symbol of everything Romans hated about the monarchy. Among those outraged was a nobleman named Lucius Junius Brutus. Standing before Lucretia's body, Brutus raised a blood-stained dagger and swore an oath. No king would ever rule Rome again. The words electrified the city. Nobles rallied behind him. Citizens joined the growing movement. Even members of the Senate, who had long feared Tarquin, began to openly oppose him. The rebellion spread faster than the king could react. And fate had chosen the worst possible moment for Tarquin, because he wasn't even in Rome. The king was away conducting military operations when the city turned against him. Brutus moved quickly. Supporters seized control of the government. The Senate declared its support for the uprising. The people backed the revolution. And perhaps most importantly of all, the soldiers refused to fight for the king. Tarquin still had supporters. He still had allies. But he no longer had Rome. When he attempted to return, he found the gates closed against him. The city he ruled had rejected him. The line of Roman kings that began with Romulus was over. After more than 200 years, Rome no longer had a king. For the first time in its history, the throne stood empty. But removing a king created a new problem. Who would rule Rome now? the Romans decided that no single man should ever again hold absolute power. Instead of one ruler, they created two. These men were called consuls. Each held immense authority. Each commanded armies. Each could govern the state. But neither could rule alone. If one consul became too powerful, the other could stop him. If one made a dangerous decision, the other could block it. The system was built on a simple idea. Never trust one man with Rome again. The Senate, which had existed since the days of Romulus, suddenly found itself more important than ever. No longer merely advising a king, it now helped guide the affairs of the Republic. Power was divided. Responsibilities were shared. And while wealthy aristocratic families still dominated politics, Rome had taken a revolutionary step. The state no longer belonged to a king. It belonged to the Republic. The Roman Republic had been born, and one day it would rule the Mediterranean world. But the new Republic was not immediately secure. Tarquin refused to accept defeat. He sought allies. He attempted to reclaim his throne. War threatened Rome once again. The young Republic would soon face its first great test. If it failed, kings might return. If it succeeded, Rome would begin a journey that would eventually reshape the Mediterranean world. The fate of the Republic hung in the balance. Rome had survived its kings. Now it faced a far greater challenge. Could ordinary citizens govern themselves? Or would the Republic collapse before it truly began? In the next episode, Rome fights its first war as a republic. And one man will make a stand so legendary that Romans would remember his name for centuries.